Sweat pooled at the small of her back as the cold steel of a revolver clattered onto the mahogany table. She owed $150,000 to the worst men in Chicago. Then the city's most ruthless boss looked at her and made an offer that would ruin her. Abigail Faith adjusted the restrictive, boned corset of her uniform, wincing as the rigid material dug fiercely into her thick waist. The uniform was a cruel, almost sadistic joke for a woman of her size. In a sea of lithe, size 2 cocktail waitresses who navigated the floor like gliding swans, Abigail was a size 22. She was heavily built, carrying her weight in wide hips, a thick torso, and heavy thighs that chafed beneath the dangerously short satin skirt. She knew how the patrons looked at her. To the high rollers at the Gilded Lily, an exclusive underground cigar and poker lounge in downtown Chicago, she was either entirely invisible or the punchline to a cruel, whispered joke. But Abigail couldn't afford the luxury of pride. She couldn't afford to quit. She couldn't afford much of anything. Her father, Arthur Faith, had died of a sudden heart attack 6 months ago. He had left behind a cramped apartment, a collection of worn-out jazz records, and a staggering $150,000 gambling debt owed to Jimmy Rossi. Jimmy wasn't a collection agency. He was a low-level enforcer and loan shark for the Chicago syndicate, who collected his late fees in blood, shattered kneecaps, and terror. Just last week, Jimmy had cornered Abigail by the dumpsters, pressing a serrated hunting knife against her plump cheek, whispering that if she didn't have the first 50 grand by Friday, he was going to start carving off pieces of her to sell on the black market. Tonight was Thursday. Balancing a heavy silver tray laden with crystal tumblers and a bottle of $200 bourbon, Abigail took a deep breath, her heavy breasts straining against the tight velvet of her top. She pushed through the heavy oak doors of the VIP room. The air inside was thick with blue cigar smoke and the sharp scent of greed. Seated around the green felt table were 4 men. Jimmy Rossi was one of them, his rat-like face glistening with nervous sweat as he stared at his cards. But it was the man sitting at the head of the table who commanded the room, sucking the very oxygen out of it. Damien Costello. He was the undisputed head of the Costello family, a man whose name was whispered in boardroom meetings and police precincts alike. Damien was 34, with sharp patrician features, dark, slicked-back hair, and eyes as cold and unforgiving as a frozen lake. He wore a bespoke charcoal suit that clung perfectly to his broad shoulders. He wasn't just dangerous. He was the apex predator in a city full of wolves. Abigail approached the table, her heart hammering against her ribs. As she leaned over to place a fresh glass of bourbon next to Damien, her hands trembled. A drop of condensation fell from the bottle, splashing directly onto Damien's expensive leather shoe. The entire table went dead silent. Jimmy Rossi inhaled sharply, a sickening grin spreading across his face. "Clumsy fat cow," Jimmy spat, eager to score points with the boss. "Apologize to Mr. Costello before he takes your tongue, piggy." Abigail's face burned with intense humiliation. Her cheeks flushed a deep, blotchy red as she scrambled for the cloth tucked into her apron, her heavy thighs shaking as she prepared to drop to her knees to wipe the shoe. "Leave it." Damien's voice was a low, resonant baritone. It didn't boom, yet it echoed with absolute authority. He didn't look at his shoe. He wasn't looking at Jimmy. He was looking directly at Abigail. His dark eyes tracked slowly over her face, taking in her flushed, rounded cheeks, her terrified, doe-like brown eyes, and the rapid rise and fall of her chest. There was no disgust in his gaze. There was no mockery. Instead, There was a heavy, calculated, and terrifying intensity. It was the look of a man evaluating a deeply complex puzzle. "What is your name?" Damien asked, his voice entirely devoid of the harsh Chicago accent most of his men possessed. "Abigail," she stammered, clutching the silver tray to her chest like a shield. "Abigail Faith." Something flickered in Damien's eyes at the mention of her last name, a microscopic shift that vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Faith," he repeated softly, rolling the syllables over his tongue. He flicked his gaze toward Jimmy Rossi. "This is the girl." Jimmy swallowed hard, his bravado instantly evaporating. "Yeah, boss. Arthur's kid. The one who holds the paper for the 150 grand. Damien leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his long fingers together. He didn't break eye contact with Abigail. The silence stretched, suffocating and heavy, until Damien finally nodded, a dismissive gesture that dismissed her from his presence, but tied her inexplicably to his orbit. "Go back to work, Abigail." Abigail practically fled the room, her breath hitching in her throat, the phantom weight of Damien Costello's stare burning a hole between her shoulder blades. She didn't know what had just happened, but the dread settling into the pit of her stomach told her that her nightmare was no longer just about Jimmy Rossi. By 3 a.m., the Gilded Lily had emptied out. The jazz band had packed up their brass, and the lingering scent of stale beer and bleach signaled the end of the shift. Abigail was exhausted. Her swollen feet throbbed in her cheap heels, and her lower back screamed in protest as she changed out of the humiliating uniform and into her oversized sweatpants and a baggy grey hoodie. She wrapped a thick, frayed scarf around her neck, dreading the brutal walk to the subway. As she stepped out of the employee exit into the freezing, snow-dusted alleyway, she froze. Blocking the exit to the street was a massive, gleaming black Maybach. The engine hummed with a low, predatory purr. Two men in dark overcoats stood by the brick wall, their hands resting casually inside their jackets. As the metal door clicked shut behind Abigail, the rear window of the Maybach slowly glided down. "Get in, Abigail." It was Damien Costello. Panic seized her chest. Her mind screamed at her to run, but her heavy legs felt like lead. Even if she could sprint, she wouldn't make it 5 feet before his men grabbed her. Trembling violently in the biting cold, she approached the vehicle. The rear door was opened from the inside by one of the guards. She slid into the cavernous, leather-scented interior, feeling absurdly out of place. Her bulky frame took up a significant portion of the plush seat, her cheap, damp sneakers sinking into the lamb's wool floor mats. Damien sat beside her, perfectly composed, pouring 2 fingers of amber liquid from a crystal decanter into a glass. "Jimmy Rossi is dead," Damien said casually, offering her the glass. Abigail gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "What?" "He was caught skimming from my shipments at the docks. An hour ago, I had him dealt with," Damien explained, his tone as casual as if he were discussing the weather. He took a slow sip of his drink. "But before he took his last breath, we settled his accounts. He transferred all his outstanding markers to me, including yours." Abigail's blood ran cold. The debt hadn't vanished. It had just been upgraded to a man who controlled the city's underworld. "Mr. Costello, please," she begged, tears spilling over her thick lashes, tracking down her cheeks. "I don't have the money. My dad, he was a sick man. He couldn't stop gambling. I work double shifts just to pay rent. I'm nothing. I have nothing. Please." Damien turned his head, his dark eyes locking onto hers in the dim light of the cabin. "I know exactly who your father was, Abigail, and I know you don't have the money." He reached into the inner breast pocket of his suit and pulled out a folded piece of heavy parchment. It was Jimmy Rossi's ledger. He tossed it onto the seat between them. "Stay with me tonight. I'll erase every debt you owe," the Mafia Boss told the plus-size waitress. The words hung in the air, heavy and surreal. Abigail stared at him, her mind short-circuiting. She looked down at herself, at her wide, soft stomach, hidden beneath the baggy hoodie, at her thick thighs, at her unmanicured, calloused hands. Men like Damien Costello dated supermodels, actresses, women with razor-sharp cheekbones and waists you could wrap 2 hands around. They did not proposition the fat, exhausted waitress from the slums. "Why?" she croaked out, her voice barely a whisper. "Look at me. I'm fat. I'm a nobody. This is a sick joke. Do you want to humiliate me? Are you going to sell me to a brothel?" Damien's jaw tightened. For a fraction of a second, a flash of genuine anger crossed his aristocratic features. "Do I look like a man who wastes his time on practical jokes?" he snapped, his voice dropping an octave. "And I don't traffic women. I am making a business transaction. You owe me $150,000. You will accompany me to my estate tonight. You will do exactly as I instruct. And tomorrow morning, you walk away free." Abigail's heart hammered frantically. "Instruction? What do you want me to do?" "I want you to be my fiancé." Abigail choked on her own breath. "Your what?" "My grandfather, Don Vincenzo, is dying. He has hours left," Damien said, the cold facade cracking just a millimeter to reveal a desperate urgency underneath. "His will states that the syndicate and the majority of our legitimate assets pass to me only if I am settled, engaged to a woman of upstanding moral character who is entirely unconnected to our world. If I am not, control defaults to my uncle Lorenzo. Lorenzo is a butcher who will start a turf war that will burn Chicago to the ground." "But why me?" Abigail pleaded. "You could hire an actress, a model." "An actress can be bought. A model would ask questions. My uncle has eyes everywhere. If I bring home a polished, plastic socialite out of nowhere, he will know it's a setup." Damien leaned closer, his scent of cedar and gunpowder wrapping around her. "But you are real. You are a struggling waitress, drowning in debt. You are the exact opposite of everything Lorenzo would expect me to parade into that house. He won't suspect a ruse because he won't believe I am capable of orchestrating one with you. You are the perfect alibi." Abigail stared at the ledger on the seat. One night of pretending to be loved by a monster, and she would be free of the crippling weight that had destroyed her father and was slowly killing her. "One night," she whispered, her voice trembling. "And the debt is gone? You swear it?" Damien reached out. Abigail flinched, but his hand moved past her face, his gloved fingers gently wiping a tear from her cheek. The touch was shockingly gentle. "On my life," Damien swore. "But be warned, Abigail. Once we cross the gates of the Costello estate, the performance must be flawless. If Lorenzo smells fear, if he suspects for a second, you are bought. He won't just kill me. He will kill you." Abigail squeezed her eyes shut. She had no choice. The ghost of Jimmy Rossi's blade was still fresh against her throat. She opened her eyes, finding a sudden, desperate reservoir of strength. "Okay, I'll do it." Damien nodded, tapping his knuckles against the glass partition. The driver immediately put the car in gear. The Maybach slid out of the alley, accelerating into the snowy Chicago night. As they drove toward the city limits, Damien opened a hidden compartment and pulled out a velvet jeweler's box. He snapped it open to reveal a diamond ring so large it caught the passing streetlights like a prism. He took her trembling, plump hand in his, slipping the cold platinum band onto her ring finger. It was a perfect fit. Abigail stared at the ring, a terrifying realization creeping into her mind. How did he know my exact ring size? Before she could ask, the massive iron gates of the Costello estate loomed in the distance, bathed in harsh security lights. The real nightmare was just beginning, and Abigail was entirely unaware that her late father's debt wasn't a gambling loss at all. It was a theft, and Damien hadn't chosen her by accident. The Maybach glided up a winding, snow-covered driveway bordered by ancient oaks, finally stopping before a sprawling limestone mansion in Highland Park. It looked less like a home and more like a fortress. Abigail stared out the tinted window, her bulky grey hoodie suddenly feeling like a neon sign of her poverty against the backdrop of unimaginable wealth. Damien stepped out first, the biting Chicago wind whipping his dark coat. He extended a gloved hand to her. Abigail hesitated, her heavy thighs trembling as she slid across the leather seats, taking his hand. His grip was firm, grounding her spiraling panic. "Shoulders back, Abigail," Damien murmured, his breath pluming in the frigid air. "You are my chosen wife. You bow to no one in this house. Not the guards, not the staff, and certainly not Lorenzo." She swallowed hard, nodding. She adjusted her thick scarf, trying to conceal the nervous flush mottling her double chin, and walked beside him up the grand marble steps. The heavy mahogany doors were pulled open by armed men in tailored suits, revealing a foyer dominated by a crystal chandelier and a sweeping double staircase. Standing at the base of those stairs was a man who looked like an older, bloated reflection of Damien. Uncle Lorenzo. Lorenzo wore a maroon velvet smoking jacket, a glass of expensive Pappy Van Winkle bourbon dangling loosely from his fingers. His eyes, small and cruel, swept over Abigail with an agonizingly slow, deliberate crawl. He took in her messy bun, her oversized sweatpants, her wide hips, and the heavy set of her jaw. A cruel, barking laugh echoed through the cavernous hall. "Damien," Lorenzo sneered, taking a sip of his bourbon, "you always did have a twisted sense of humor. What is this? You picked up a stray from some diner on Rush Street? Did you promise her a deep-dish pizza to play dress-up?" Heat flared in Abigail's cheeks, the familiar, stinging shame of being mocked for her size, threatening to drown her. She instinctively tried to shrink behind Damien's broad shoulders, but Damien didn't move to shield her. Instead, he stepped slightly to the side, leaving her exposed. "You bow to no one," his voice echoed in her mind. Something snapped inside Abigail. She was tired. She was tired of being threatened by thugs in alleys, tired of bone-crushing corsets, and violently tired of cruel men thinking her weight made her a target. Years of handling belligerent, handsy drunks at the Gilded Lily suddenly solidified her spine. "Actually," Abigail said, her voice cutting through the foyer with startling clarity, "I prefer a good ribeye, and I suggest you mind your manners, Lorenzo. Or didn't your mother teach you how to greet your future niece?" The entire foyer went dead silent. The armed guards exchanged nervous glances. Damien's lips twitched, the ghost of a proud smirk flashing across his stoic face. Lorenzo's smile vanished, replaced by a purple flush of rage. He took a threatening step forward, his eyes narrowing into slits. "You have a sharp tongue for a fat, uncultured sow. Do you have any idea who you are speaking to?" "I'm speaking to a man standing in a drafty hallway in a bathrobe," Abigail fired back, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, though her voice remained remarkably steady. She stepped closer to Damien, slipping her plump arm through his. "Damien, darling, is this the welcoming committee?" "Because I've had warmer receptions on the Red Line subway at 2 a.m. Damien let out a low, genuine chuckle that seemed to rattle Lorenzo to his core. "Forgive him, Mia Lusa, my light," Damien said, patting her hand. "Lorenzo has always struggled with grace. Where is grandfather?" "He's in the West Wing," Lorenzo spat, his eyes locked onto the massive platinum diamond currently blazing on Abigail's pudgy finger. The sight of the ring seemed to strike him physically. "The doctor from Northwestern Memorial says he won't make it to sunrise. You're too late, Damien. A cheap stunt with a broad you dragged out of the gutter won't convince Vincenzo." "We will see," Damien said coldly, leading Abigail past his seething uncle. As they walked down the long, portrait-lined corridor, Damien leaned down, his lips brushing against her ear. "Flawless," he whispered. The sheer proximity of him, the scent of cedar and expensive cologne, sent a shiver down Abigail's heavy spine that had nothing to do with the cold. They entered a dimly lit master bedroom, smelling sharply of antiseptic and old age. Propped up on a sea of pillows was Don Vincenzo. He looked frail, his skin like translucent parchment, but his dark eyes, the same eyes as Damien's, were sharp and piercing. "Damian," the old man wheezed, his voice like dry leaves crushing together. "I'm here, nonno," Damien said gently, sitting on the edge of the bed. "And I brought her, just as I promised." He gently pulled Abigail forward. She felt absurd, standing in her sweatpants before a dying Mafia Don, but she stood tall. Vincenzo's roomy eyes studied her. He didn't look at her body with the same disgust Lorenzo had. He looked at her eyes. He reached out a trembling, bony hand. Abigail, acting on pure instinct, gently wrapped her warm, soft hands around his cold one. "You are not the polished dolls he usually parades around," Vincenzo whispered, a faint smile touching his pale lips. "You have dirt on your shoes. You have calluses. You know what it means to work." "I do, sir," Abigail said softly. "Good. This life, it requires a spine of steel, not porcelain." Vincenzo coughed violently, gripping her hand tighter. He looked past her to Damien. "Lorenzo, he is a snake. He will tear the family apart. You must be the anchor, Damien. Are you bound to this woman before God?" "I am, nonno," Damien lied without a flinch. Vincenzo nodded, his eyes fluttering closed. "The lawyer is in the study. Sign the papers. The family is yours, my boy. Protect it." Damien kissed the old man's forehead, guiding Abigail out of the room. As the heavy door clicked shut, Abigail let out a breath she felt she had been holding for an hour. "Did we do it? Is it over?" "Not yet," Damien said, his voice dropping into a dangerous, icy register. "Now comes the hard part. Follow me." Damien didn't lead her to the study. Instead, he guided her down a spiraling stone staircase into the cavernous, damp wine cellar beneath the estate. The air smelled of aged cork and earth. "Where are the lawyers?" Abigail whispered, her heavy arms wrapping defensively around her thick waist. "There are no lawyers tonight," Damien replied, turning to face her under the dim glow of a single wrought-iron chandelier. "You asked me how I knew your exact ring size. I don't guess, Abigail. I calculate." Abigail frowned, her heart rate spiking. "What does my ring size have to do with my father's gambling debt? Your father, Arthur, didn't owe Jimmy Rossi a dime," Damien said softly, his dark eyes locking onto hers. He wasn't a degenerate gambler. Your father was a master accountant for Lorenzo's legitimate shipping businesses. 4 months ago, Arthur discovered a discrepancy. He found undeniable proof that Lorenzo was embezzling millions from the family, and worse, buying black market thallium to slowly poison my grandfather. The cold cellar spun around Abigail. She gripped the edge of a mahogany wine rack to steady her heavy frame. Poison? But the hospital said my dad died of a massive heart attack. He was murdered, Abigail, Damien corrected, his voice hardening into cold steel. Lorenzo's men injected him with potassium chloride, which mimics a heart attack. But before they killed him, Arthur managed to steal the master hard drive containing all the evidence. Lorenzo couldn't find it, so he fabricated the debt. He used Jimmy to terrorize you, hoping you would accidentally sell the drive or lead them right to it. Tears, hot and fast, spilled over Abigail's plump cheeks. Her father hadn't ruined them. He had died trying to do the right thing. Touching, isn't it? A chilling voice echoed through the cellar. Abigail gasped, spinning around. Uncle Lorenzo stood at the base of the stone steps, a silenced pistol gripped firmly in his hand. 2 heavily armed thugs flanked him, their expressions devoid of mercy. Lorenzo offered a reptilian smile. Damien, you were always too clever. I knew you'd figure out the thallium, but I didn't think you'd connect the dots to the Faith girl. He leveled the gun directly at Abigail's chest. Where is the drive, you fat bitch? My men tore your father's apartment apart twice. Abigail couldn't pull air into her lungs. The black barrel of the gun looked like an abyss. I don't know. She really doesn't, Lorenzo, Damien said smoothly. He didn't reach for a weapon. He merely stepped sideways, placing his broad body entirely between Lorenzo's gun and Abigail. Arthur knew you'd torture her if she knew the truth, so he hid it in plain sight, inside the sleeves of his vintage jazz records, the ones Abigail refused to sell. Abigail's breath hitched, the dusty crates of records sitting in her living room. Lorenzo's eyes widened with greedy realization. Brilliant, but useless to you now. You're both dying down here. A tragic murder-suicide fueled by the grief of Vincenzo's passing. My men are already kicking down her apartment door. You're right about one thing, Damien said, casually checking his heavy Rolex. Men are at her apartment, but they aren't yours. Damien's cell phone buzzed loudly in the quiet cellar. He didn't break eye contact with his uncle. That will be my capos. The records are secure. The encrypted files proving your treason and embezzlement have just been distributed to the Syndicate Commission. You're finished, Lorenzo. Lorenzo's face drained of all color. With a primal roar of panic, he raised the gun toward Damien's head. He never pulled the trigger. The shadows behind Lorenzo suddenly detached from the stone walls. Damien's personal guards, who had been waiting in the dark recesses of the cellar for hours, moved with lethal, synchronized precision. A silenced shot echoed, a mere thwip, and Lorenzo's gun clattered to the floor. He howled, clutching a shattered wrist as the guards violently pinned him to the ground. Take him to the warehouse, Damien commanded, his face an emotionless mask. The commission will deal with him at dawn. As they dragged the screaming traitor up the stairs, the adrenaline finally abandoned Abigail. Her knees buckled beneath her weight. Strong arms caught her before she hit the stone floor. Damien pulled her heavy, trembling body against his chest, holding her tight. It's over, he murmured into her hair. I've had men watching you for weeks, trying to locate the drive before I moved on Lorenzo. I had to wait until grandfather transferred power to act. You are safe now, Abigail." Hours later, the morning sun cast a warm golden hue across the estate's massive kitchen. Don Vincenzo had passed peacefully in the night. The house was quiet. Abigail sat at the marble island, wearing one of Damien's oversized dress shirts, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. Damien entered, shedding his suit jacket. He slid a thick envelope across the counter. "Jimmy Rossi's ledger is burned," Damien said softly. "Inside is the deed to a secure townhouse in Lincoln Park and a trust fund. It is the least the Costello family owes Arthur Faith's daughter. You never have to wait another table." Abigail stared at the envelope. It was freedom. She looked down at her thick left hand, the massive platinum diamond catching the sunlight. She reached over, slowly trying to slide it off. Damien's hand shot out, his warm fingers trapping hers against the cool marble. "The job is done, Damien," she whispered, looking up into his intense brown eyes. "You saved your family. I know this isn't real. I'm a size 22 waitress, not a mafia queen. In my world, everyone smiles while holding a knife behind their back," Damien said, stepping closer, his thumb gently caressing her knuckles. "But you? You stood in front of Lorenzo, wearing sweatpants, and told him to go to hell. I don't want a fragile porcelain doll, Abigail. I want a woman with a spine of steel." He cupped her rounded cheek, leaning in until his lips brushed hers. "Keep the ring. Stay with me. Let me show you how a man treats a queen." Abigail looked at him, seeing no deception, only burning respect and fierce possession. She smiled, leaning her soft curves into him. "If I stay," she murmured, "I'm redecorating that wine cellar." Damien laughed, capturing her lips in a kiss that promised her the world. Did you expect that plot twist? If Abigail and Damien's intense, high-stakes romance had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. Do you think Abigail made the right choice staying in the dangerous mafia world? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to share this incredible story with your friends and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling, dramatic, and real-life inspired audio stories every single week. Turn on notifications